Hey everyone, welcome to today's High Five Tips. This is part of the second installment as part of my Engaging Your Employees series for all you leaders out there. And the topic today is about holding candid performance conversations. And so I know many of us kind of just dread having that with employees, right? When they're not meeting your expectations and you need to, really kind of hold them accountable for that and try to get them on the right path. It's generally most leaders don't have a lot of fun confronting that type of situation. And oftentimes we'll just tend to avoid it and until it festers to a point where it becomes much more of a problem, and sometimes at that point it's an irreversible one in terms of kind of just a downward landslide of performance and maybe even attitude or things of that nature. So I'm going to share with you some tips today, kind of a process that you can use to structure, to prepare and to structure your conversation with an employee. And feel free to add your own thoughts to it in the comments or your questions, either during this broadcast or if you're watching the replay. We'd love to hear that. And if you find that you need help with this beyond this video, feel free to reach out to me as well, and we can explore some options there. Okay, so one of the first tips, I'm going to keep this shorter and sweet, shorter and sweeter tonight. But I'll never forget a time when I had a boss who approached me. She wasn't happy with a number of things. I was a newer employee, and I'd been there maybe, I don't know, less than 6 months, and she wasn't happy about a few things, and she presented me with a 2-page list of things she wanted changed. 2-page list in about 9-point font. And that's what she hit me with. And I was like, wow. Like, what is all that? And so I actually had to coach her a little bit, like, of all this stuff, like, what's really the most important here? Like, what's really bothering you? Because, one of the things you don't want to do is just ambush the employee, right? And just lay on all this stuff, right? So when we're addressing performance issues, you really want to boil things down to the critical few. It doesn't mean you ignore the others, but you might have to address them later. So prioritizing is really important. So that's kind of a bonus tip. So one of the first steps you want to take, though, that I recommend is to examine what's your own role. Ask yourself, what is my role in this problem? Like, what's my contribution to this problem with the employee? And the contribution might be, for example, with the boss that I had, I'll call her, I don't want to use her real name, but and this was many years ago, but I'll call her Sunny. And so let's say one of the things that she could have done, although she was very the opposite of Sunny, but in that conversation, one of the things that in her shoes, what she could have done, for example, was, what was her contribution? She could have let me, her employee, know earlier when something came up for her, right? So obviously these things didn't happen overnight. They happened over a period of time. So that would be one thing that she was responsible. She could have nipped something in the bud rather than storing all this stuff up and then unloading it right onto me. So, what other contributions? Maybe you criticized that employee in the past about something. And so now they seem a little withdrawn or resistant. Maybe you allow that behavior from others in the team, and they don't have any consequences, any negative ones. And so they've seen that as, hey, that's acceptable, that's modeled. But now it's gotten to a point where it's not okay with you. So again, large or small, what are your contributions? Maybe you never provided clear expectations, right? Or you think you did, but it wasn't to them. So those are some things to think about. What's your role in it? And part of the reason for that is that can help open up the conversation, and what we're going to talk about later around safety, creating safety. So examine your role. That's number one. Number two, describe the gap between what you expect, kind of the outcome you want to see, versus what you're getting. What do you expect? What are you getting? Right? And you can just explain that in a very factual way, kind of observations, right? You don't have to get into your opinion, at least not yet, about that. But maybe your expectation, for example, is that everyone shows up by 8 o'clock in the morning to work, right? And they punch in by 8 o'clock at work, or if they're a salaried employee, they're reachable by 8 o'clock. Okay, and in these COVID-19 times, maybe it's that they're logged in or some other method if it's a remote worker. But 8 o'clock, you want to know that they're working. Okay, and this person maybe clocks in or shows up at 10 after 8 or 8:30 or maybe 11, and it's kind of a hopscotch. So sharing your expectations would be what? I expect people to show up on time, and have a rationale for that. And I noticed that, just in the last 2 weeks, there have been 3 occasions where you came in more than 30 minutes late, right? So again, you can just be just the observation. There's no judgment there. What you want to do, though, is ultimately you want to create when you describe before you start explaining the expectations, you want to create a safe environment. So ideally, you're going to meet in a neutral place, or nowadays with everything being virtual, decide, would phone be better? Would video be better? What day of the week or time of day might be better? So when they might be a little bit more relaxed, when you might be more relaxed, right? Versus rushing around to provide ample time. So create the conditions to have a conducive conversation, and one that will be respectful, right? Get yourself in the right emotional, psychological space, and where you're not at, odds, where you're kind of focused on it and might even broach the subject with them. I'd like to talk to you about such and such, and get their commitment to do that. So once you do that and you share your expectations and kind of describe the gap, then you can share kind of the conclusions that you're drawing from that, kind of what we call your story, right? Is it making you think that they're not committed to the team? Do you think that they don't care about the results? Do you think that they're not competent? Whatever it may be. But just be clear before you go into the conversation, kind of what led you to this. So you share your observations, and then move into what's the meaning that has for you, and what's the impact, right? What's the impact to you or to the team because of the pattern that you've observed, or whatever the incident was with that person. And then leave room for them to chime in with their views. So ask them about, do they see it that way? How do they see it, for example? Or maybe, hey, am I missing something? Right? So give space for them to respond and to listen and be curious, right? Because you might be seeing things wrong. You might not have all the information. So that's really important. That's all part of describing that gap in expectations around the performance. The third tip is really to explore what are the natural, and this is something you do with them, what are the natural consequences or impacts? Like if this were to continue, right, they keep showing up late, naturally, what's kind of the impact to the team? What's the impact to maybe your customers, right? Particularly if it's like a retail establishment, what's the impact, right? People show up to shop or to buy breakfast or whatever it is, or to mail something, to FedEx something, and there's nobody there. What kind of impact? Well, okay, lost business, lost revenue. What does lost revenue mean? Potentially reduced hours, whatever, right? So just follow it through to its natural conclusion there. Okay, these aren't imposed consequences; these are just natural impacts. That's an outgrowth of it. Maybe it affects the relationship. Maybe that's the impact. Like I feel like I can't count on you or trust you or rely on you because things are contingent, and I'm waiting, and it affects my deliverables, whatever it is. Okay, so or I have to accommodate or explain to the rest of the team what's going on, and so whatever it may be, but explore those. That's a third tip. The fourth one, and this is one that we often, when we have our story or our conclusion about what we think is going on, we have these judgments. We overlook this fact of what is it a motivation issue? Oftentimes we think they're just they're willfully not doing it, what we ask them to do. But sometimes it's ability. And so you have to ask yourself, is it a motivation issue or is it an ability issue here? And on what level is it a motivation ability issue? Because sometimes, I might be motivated individually, but my peers, might not want me to do that, right? Because that might not be the norm. So there might be some social pressure, right? So you can look at it from 3 tiers. One, and this is something that's talked about by Vital Smarts in their Crucial Accountability book, or it's now called Crucial Confrontations. But it's a 6-cell model, right, of motivation and ability, right? Motivation and ability at the top, and then your self, your social aspects of things, social pressures, and then the more structural aspect of things. That's like policies, procedures, things that may get in the way, right? That may get in the way of them being motivated, may hinder their motivation or may help their motivation, may hinder their ability or may boost their ability, right? And so we can use this framework and explore with them. You can kind of test by asking questions to kind of see where the problem really lies here, because then that's where the solutions. We have a tendency as managers, as directors, whomever, to just jump in and try to fix something without really understanding what the problem is. It's just like if you've got a mechanic working on a car, what's the first thing they do? Right? They do a diagnostic of some sort, right? So if you just jump in and try to fix it right away, if you're lucky, you might be right. If you've seen it 1,000 times, hey, maybe. But you want to do the due diligence and do the assessment. So assess motivation, ability, and address the root cause, right? And there's ways, and this could be another broadcast, but how do you make it, if it's a motivation issue, then what are some ways to make it motivating for them? Well, I mean, one is like, are they somehow positive? Are they rewarded for basically not performing up to your expectations? Like, what's the positive for them to do that? Or are they avoiding something that's maybe painful for them or uncomfortable for them? Okay, and on and maybe they just need acknowledgement. It's like they're always criticized when they're doing something wrong, but they're never, recognized when they do something right. So that could be part of it too, right? And that would be part of your role as the leader. Maybe they need some kind of incentive. to make it worthwhile, do all this work to make it worthwhile. I know for me, entering in, like doing all this administrative work and stuff like that, I avoid it, right? And sometimes at my detriment, even just, for getting paid, right? Sometimes you have to do that. So you have to figure out, well, what is motivating? What is motivating? So, and the other thing is, if it's an ability issue, how can you make it a smoother process for them? Like maybe how can you build their strengths up, right? It might be some training or whatnot. Are there ways that they can work around their weaknesses? What are the things that might help them? Maybe it's pairing them up with someone else in the department that can help them out, or pitch in, right, to share the load if it's too much workload. Or maybe there's this nonsensical bureaucracy that's in the way, or other types of barriers that they're facing. And with these COVID times, for example, one of the barriers that many employees are facing right now is that they need to school their young kids. So some of them might not be as productive, or at least not in the early morning, because they need to homeschool their kids or get them started, whereas before they could just drop them off. It wasn't maybe as involved. And then the interruptions from the kids and all that. So maybe you need to focus some time on brainstorming with them on how they can create more kind of boundaries so that they can focus on their work. Or maybe flexibility in the schedule, right? Instead of requiring that they log in at 8, maybe by 10 o'clock, and just making that the standard, would work. The fifth tip for having this candid conversation is, create a plan of action and follow up with them, right? Create a plan. And if you notice with all these tips, right, it's not so much a confrontation. You are confronting the issue. You're confronting the issue, but not the person here. Okay? And a lot of times we avoid it because we feel like we're challenging them and we don't want to hurt their feelings, or we're afraid of their reaction. But you're really confronting the issue here, and you're collaborating with them. You're coaching them. It's that type of conversation. You're brainstorming with them, right? It's a two-way street here to figure out together, how are we going to solve this? So it takes it off your shoulders to be the one that comes up with the solutions of how we're going to fix all this. You may have your ideas for sure, and you may know, but it's more of getting them involved, because quite honestly, if they come up with the idea, what's likely to happen, right? They're more likely to stick with it if it's an idea that came from them versus something imposed by you, right? So these are my 5 tips here for helping you to have these candid conversations. One is examine your own role and your overall goal for the conversation. Describe the gap between your expectations and the outcome that you're receiving. Explore what the natural consequences are, okay, with them. If their behavior or their pattern continues, what the impact is. Determine if it's a motivation issue or an ability issue, right? Kind of diagnose that and brainstorm some ideas on how to address it. One or the other, might be both, a little bit of both. And lastly, create a plan and set a time to follow up. You say, let's plan to follow up in 2 weeks on this, or let's plan to follow up in 30 days, and schedule it so that it happens. And many times, because we don't follow up, things don't happen. Maybe they get caught up in their day-to-day and they forget, or you do the same, right? And if you don't come back around to it, then they don't see it as important. They know it's important enough for you to bring up, but not really that important, apparently, because you're not checking in around it. So build that in up front. Build that into your process of a check-in point. And some of the ideas or some of the plans you came up with, they may or not be effective, and that's okay. That way the next time you say, well, how is it going? Right? Or you can share with them, it's not working the way I thought it would. Let's make an adjustment. Let's talk about making an adjustment. Okay, so, and vice versa, it gives them license to do that with you. So just build that in, bake it into the process. So those are my tips. Thank you all for watching. If you found this helpful, please share this broadcast. If you're on Facebook, you can share with your Facebook friends. If you're on LinkedIn, share this with your LinkedIn followers and connections. If you're on YouTube, you can send someone the link. So thank you for watching. And next Tuesday, I'll be having the next installment in this series. And this is on how to hold career conversations. And I'm going to give you a framework for that, for holding career conversations that work. Also, on Fridays, I'm on at 12 noon Pacific time, 12 noon. And it's really an opportunity for you to ask whatever questions you have. So whatever work leadership questions or challenges you may be facing, if you're job searching, questions about the job search, if you're working within a company and dealing with a difficult coworker or team or challenge, it's an opportunity to get some advice and feedback and whatnot. So that's what we've got coming up. And I'm also going to be speaking to a group on coaching culture. For some of you, it may be of interest. That'll be on the 15th. So next week on August 15th for Association for Talent Development in Los Angeles. And then on Friday the 16th, I'll be having a kind of an open forum, career conversations. This is with the Association for Talent Development in San Diego. So please join us if you're in the mix and that's of interest to you, or you can go to my LinkedIn page. You'll see some posts and click on the link. All right, so thank you for joining and take care. Bye-bye.